Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're jumping into Principal Component Analysis, PCA.
That's right.
We've looked at sources that really focus on the core ideas behind it in statistics.
Yeah, the fundamentals.
And our mission really is just to unpack PCA a bit, make it clearer, talk about where you'd use it, and how to make sense of the results.
Exactly. I mean, think of it like this. PCA helps you look at a really complex data set and kind of zoom out to see the main patterns. Instead of getting bogged down in every single detail, it simplifies things.
Okay, so simplification. I've got this huge data set, tons of variables. What's the first big win with PCA?
Dimensionality reduction, that's the fancy term.
Right.
Basically shrinking the data.
Yeah.
If you have, say, 50 different measurements for each observation, PCA tries to find just a handful of new summary variables, the principal components that capture most of the important differences, the variance in your original data.
Okay, these new summary variables. How are they found?
Yeah.
I remember reading about the covariance matrix. Sounds a bit technical.
It is, under the hood. But the idea is, well, the covariance matrix shows how all your original variables change together. And PCA uses that information to pinpoint the directions in your data where things are spread out the most. Maximum variance, right. Those directions are your principal components.
Got it. Now, something else that came up was standardization. Why do we need to scale the data first?
Yeah, that's crucial. Imagine you're measuring height in meters and maybe, I don't know, yearly income in dollars.
Okay. Big difference in numbers.
Huge difference. Without standardizing, PCA would likely just latch onto the income variable because the sheer size of the numbers is bigger.
So it would overweight it even if height changes were just as interesting.
Precisely. Standardization, like converting to z-scores, puts everything on, let's say, a level playing field, so scale doesn't bias the analysis.
Makes sense. So we standardize, we find these components, but how do we know which ones tell us the most? That's eigenvalues and eigenvectors, isn't it?
That's where it gets really interesting, yeah. The eigenvectors define the direction of each component. Think of them as arrows pointing along the main axis of variation.
Okay, the direction.
In the eigenvalues. They tell you the magnitude or the amount of variance explained by that component along that eigenvector's direction.
So a bigger eigenvalue means that component is capturing more of the data's spread.
Exactly. More of the story. It's a stronger pattern in your data.
Like a louder signal.
Good analogy, yeah.
And how do we figure out, how much the total picture we're seeing with a few components?
That's the proportion of variance explained. You can calculate it for each component, what percentage of the total variability it accounts for.
Right.
Then you can add them up. Maybe the first two components capture, say, 75% of the total variance. That tells you a lot.
Which leads to maybe the trickiest bit. How many components do you actually keep? You want simplicity, but not too simple, right?
It's a balance. There are a couple of common ways. One is the scree plot.
Scree plot?
Yeah, you plot the eigenvalues, and they usually drop off pretty sharply, then level out. You might keep the components before that elbow where it flattens.
Okay, like finding the point of diminishing returns.
Sort of, yeah. Or you could just decide beforehand, I want to explain 85% of the variance and keep adding components until you hit that target.
Okay. Now, people sometimes mention PCA and factor analysis together. Are they the same thing?
Good question. They sound similar, but no, not really. PCA is fundamentally about reducing dimensions, summarizing the variance you observe. Factor analysis is more about finding underlying, unobserved, latent factors that might be causing the correlations you see in your data. It's more theoretical, trying to explain the structure.
Different goals then. Got it. And what about multicollinearity? I read PCA helps with that.
It does. Multicollinearity is when your input variables are highly correlated with each other.
Which can cause problems for some models, right?
Exactly. But PCA transforms those correlated variables into a set of principal components that are, by definition, uncorrelated with each other. Problem solved, in a way.
Neat trick. And visualizing this stuff. Biplots.
Biplots, yes, they're incredibly useful. They let you plot your data points and show how the original variables relate to the first two principal components, usually.
So you can see clusters of points and which original measurements are driving those component scores.
That's the idea. Helps interpretation a lot.
One last thing, does standard PCA work for, say, survey data with yes-no answers or categories?
Generally, no. Standard PCA assumes your data is numerical, continuous. For categorical data, you'd need different techniques, maybe something like multiple correspondence analysis, but that's a whole other deep dive.
Right. So wrapping up, the big idea is PCA helps you cut through complexity,
Yeah, it finds the most important ways your data varies.
Gives you a simpler, clearer view of the underlying structure.
Precisely. It highlights the main dimensions of variation.
So, thinking beyond this discussion, how could finding these hidden patterns with PCA, these key dimensions, maybe reveal something unexpected in your own work or area of interest? What structures are waiting there to be simplified and understood? Something to think about. Join us next time on The Deep Dive.